You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the old Options Insider Radio Network, where we go a little bit abroad, beyond our traditional purview in the world of just all things listed options and derivatives, and explore what's going on the crypto side of the fence. So we'll talk the futures, the growing options scene. Going to get to that in a little bit. Some of the spot, all the vol, the volume, the skew, the unusual activity, all that good stuff. My name is Mark Longo from the optionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, on the aforementioned network. You know where to find all the good stuff that we do in between episodes. That's, of course, the optionsinsider.com. That's the place to go for your updates, your rundowns, all that good stuff. Or, of course, just subscribe to our full network. I know we get an influx of new people all the time to this show, maybe who aren't that familiar with options. So subscribe to the full network. Good place to start, of course. Options Bootcamp. You can subscribe to those shows as well if you want to just mainline some learning, some education. Options Playbook Radio, another great place to start. Maybe some of the early option blocks where we get some early strategy blocks with Uncle Mike and others. Also good places to start. I've been toying with the idea of creating a pure educational theme for the network, a little feed. You guys can get all those shows, plus some of the great archived educational content we've done. Maybe we'll toy with doing something like that to make it even easier for you guys to mainline all the great educational content that we have and indeed have been producing for nigh on 14 years here on the network. Crazy to say that out loud. This is going to be a little bit of a quick hit crypto update kind of episode. So without further ado, let's keep on rolling right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we break down what the heck's going on in the world of the leading digital asset, of course, Bitcoin. We love our crypto hot seat segments where we go deep into a certain area of the space, but sometimes I like to just give you just the facts, ma'am. And that's kind of what we're up to here this week. Come into Showtime, we're seeing Bitcoin continuing its, shall we say, slow drift to the upside. Last week we ended the show shy of that 96 handle, about 95.81. And coming into today's show, we're a wee bit above that, about 145 handles or so to the north there, right around 97 and a quarter or so. So gentle drift to the upside for those of you who were looking for perhaps that bullish story coming out of the halving. It is happening, just perhaps not quite as aggressively or as vigorously as perhaps some of you may have hoped. Let's get on out to the volatility space. All this data coming courtesy of our friends over there in SKEW land. SKEW.com is the place to go to kick the tires for yourselves over there. See what the heck's going on out there. You want to see what's going on in Bitcoin SKEW? that's the place to go. It's literally in the name. Coming into today's show, we're seeing the realized 30-day vol out there in Bitcoin options almost literally unched. It's hovering right around a 72%. Remember, listeners, realized vol is the volatility that the marketplace has actually exhibited over the last 30 days out there. So that's what we've actually seen. You crunch the numbers. That's what it's delivered. Versus the implied, which is what the market is pricing in to current Bitcoin options. That also unched right around 64. What does that mean when the vol is unched? That means the level of movement we're seeing out there in the broad Bitcoin market is enough to sustain the current levels of volatility. These volatility levels are warranted. If Bitcoin wasn't moving as much, then you'd see that vol come in even more. But it's hovering right around a 72% realized and a 64% implied, which is kind of weird also, too. If you know anything about implied versus realized, seeing their implied at a little bit of a discount is a little bit strange. So perhaps something poised to pop off out there. Going on out to the number one venue out there for Bitcoin options, which is Deribit. A pretty active week yet again. Remember last show we were talking about some numbers in the 150 odd million notional. Again, I know I hate that notional number, listeners, but c'est la vie. You have to go with the convention. If you want to hear me pushing back on that a little bit, listen to our TWIFO program this week. I chat with the folks at CME trying to get them to come to the dark side of actually talking some contract volume. Maybe we'll get some progress over there if CME starts doing it along with us here on the show. But a decent week out there in Deribit again last week. The second was the big day with about 169 million worth of notional on the tape, followed by the first with 125 million worth of notional. So strong times out there from a post-halving options volume perspective. Deribit has been lighting it up out there. The big prints out there seemed like they were coming scattering of days. On the 5th, we saw the June 11,750 calls going up 368 times when Bitcoin was about 9,700. And then we saw also a 200 lot same day, a little bit later in the day, of the June 10,750 calls. So not close enough to think that they're a spread, and they're certainly not marked as a spread, and the ratios aren't right. But maybe there was a bit of a roll. If it was a roll, it'd be kind of interesting. They're just going straight up. They're not going up and out at all. Also saw a 250 lot of the July 11,000 calls going up on the 8th of June. So that would be today, earlier this morning when Bitcoin was 97.40 out there. Not getting sides on all these. You just get side for a lot of this stuff. Not so much anymore. So we kind of have to read between the tea leaves out there a little bit. Today, kind of a light day out there. The big prints in Deribit are about 400 of the June, 7,500 puts, actually. So a little bit of puts leading the dance out there, followed by about 288 of the July 11,000 calls. Let's get out to some of the what's going on CME land, because that's actually even more interesting. And again, listen to the episode we just did last week of TWIFO, where we talked to the folks in charge of crypto over there at CME and explore why they're all of a sudden seeing a spike in volume, because as we said many times on this show, CME was kind of anemic. I mean, it's the 800-pound gorilla in the derivative space, and yet their volume was effectively de minimis on the overall crypto side from an options perspective. Certainly not so much in the futures. Futures have been doing pretty well for a while. But the past couple of weeks, all of a sudden, the worm has turned out there. We saw on the 4th out there on CME, saw 1,500 lots of the June 11,100 14,000 vertical going up, and then we saw looks like 1,000. Remember, some of these sizes are a little bit screwy on SKEW. I think it doesn't translate fully out here. It's, according to SKEW, 1,000 lot of the June 10,800, 13,500. I think the strikes are usually right. The size might be a little bit. Maybe the multipliers are screwing up what's going on out there so maybe they inflate those. Actually, I think that's what they're doing. I think they're inflating those to keep it in line with some of the other notional stuff we're seeing out there. If that's the case, that's kind of where I'll have to chat with those folks at SKEW and see what it is that makes their CME numbers a little bit weird. So perhaps you may have to divide those by 5, listeners, to get the true numbers. But either way, those verticals are lighting it up out there on CME. And we also saw on the 1st, pretty much exactly a week ago during showtime, a July 12,000, 15,000 vertical. Again, going up, according to SKEW, 1,000 times. It might be a wee bit less than that. Might be at the old 200 lot, which I think we have seen before out here. So interesting stuff out here. Either way, those numbers are pretty sizable. Remember, there is a sizable multiplier to these out there. So again, if the Deribit contracts are 1-to-1, they could be doing that to make it line up. But it is a wee bit misleading when you look at the pure raw numbers out there. Either way, though, CME is making a big jump big jump. Coming into this week's show, CME open interest is more than doubling now. First off, a couple of milestones. First off, we see Deribit crossing the 1 billion open interest mark pretty much for the first time over the course of the past week out here. So they've been rocking and rolling. It wasn't too long ago we were talking 300, maybe 400 million out in net OI. Again, this is notional volume out here. So open interest over 1 billion. It's exactly, as of showtime, 1.0 billion right now. So a little bit of a tip of the hat to the folks over there at Deribit. Clearly, post-halving, we're seeing a volume lift across the board. And then number 2, listeners, CME has just catapulted into the number 2 spot, and they're not over these days. Even though Deribit's at a record, they're not that far behind Deribit. They were at about a 160, 170 odd million, I believe, in OI last week. This week, listeners, that OI has almost doubled, over 300 million, 304 million for CME. So a righteous, a firm number 2 there for CME. They were just a couple of million OI not too long ago. So something has turned, something has flipped, some customer has turned on over there at CME, and they're bringing the size. They're almost at a third of the OI of Deribit now, which has been the number 1 leading platform for a while. So folks out there who've been watching this space saying, when's the 800-pound gorilla going to really kick it into gear? Maybe this is it. Someone's liking their verticals and doing so for size over there on CME land. Then we got to OKEX taking the 3rd spot, 61 million. Number 4, LedgerX, 51 million. And then rounding out the top 5, even though it's a very almost non-existent top 5, 68,000 for backed on the options front. So we said it before, we'll say it again. Options not really lighting it up out there in backed land. Let's get on out to SKEW land out here. SKEW was almost minus 5% out there last week, showing some of the calls back in favor. This week is kind of back to a coin flip, kind of back to almost a smile, about 0.4%. So not exactly showing a bias really in either direction. So maybe those of you who are looking for a little bit more optimism to the upside, maybe that's not the sign you were looking for. The call to put ratio is also down to about 42% from 48%. So that means puts are leading the dance out there right now, listeners. Going back to the OI really quickly, I remember the CME has more than doubled effectively, and that's put their percentage of overall options open interest now has effectively jumped quite a bit as well. It was 14% last week, which is already a huge jump. Now it's up to 21%. So Deribit's at 71%, and CME is at 21%. OKEX 4%, LedgerX 4%, backed as a rounding error. So CME coming on. Whoever's trading size over there at CME land is putting them on the board. Let's look at the months and see where the most options activity is aggregated. Yet again, it is June. Folks like the quarterlies out here in crypto. That's just the way it lines up. And June is just growing leaps and bounds above everything else. 87,100 contracts are aggregated now across all the venues in June. Nothing else is even close. The closest is September with 17,300 contracts. So it's a distant second. 70,000 contracts less. People just want to play in June for whatever reason. Of course, the end of this month, we'll see probably a lot of that paper start migrating out to September. So we'll see September grow, but not until, I think, June is off the board. And people have been talking for a while about what strikes are interesting. We've been saying for a while, it's usually, of late, has been the 7,000 and the 10,000 strikes. Those are still popular, but it seems like new strikes are coming into favor these days as we're gently drifting towards the 10,000 strike again. That's, of course, the 10,000 strike with about 9,900 contracts open out there. And then we've got the 11,000 strikes. Actually, number 1 is now the 11,000 strike with about 11,100, followed hot on its heels by the 12,000 strike with 11,000 even. So number 1, number 2, neck and neck are pretty much 11,000 and 12,000 now. So maybe that's a little bit of a change because 7,000 dominating the tape seemed a little odd when we were continually drifting away from it. So it's 11,000, then 12,000, and then effectively 10,000. And then it falls off to things like 14,000 with 9,100. So interesting. Definitely, it seems like aggregate open interest-wise, it seems like the calls are coming into fruition, even though SKEW not exactly reflecting that out there, which is kind of interesting. Let's look at the futures front now. CME land, pretty much a light volume week, about 4,500 contracts or less most of the days, except for Tuesday the 2nd. That was the big day with about 16,000 contracts on the tape. Futures front on backed land, they do a little bit better on the futures. Our old friend, the backed volume bot. A good follow on the old Twitters if you are interested in such things. They're at about 1,400 contracts. That puts them down about 26%. Their all-time high, remember, was 66.01. That was back on December 18th of last year. Open interest is currently about 13.25 million out there for the futures, up about 3%. But again, backed, leading the dance on the money-raising front, not so much in the generating volume front out there. Going on into some of the news and Bitcoin front really quickly. A lot of folks chattering about what's going on with JP Morgan and Bitcoin. Of course, Jamie Dimon very infamously called Bitcoin a fraud back, September, towards the end of 2017. A lot of people have used that as kind of a benchmark for what's happened before. And after that, of course, it rallied to 20,000 not too long after that, dropped under 4,000 a couple of times. We've since have seen JP Morgan launch their own coin, JPM coin, a stable coin out there. So they're playing in the crypto space, but they still were a little bit hands off with some of the other venues and content and crypto exchanges out there, including our friends from last week, Gemini. Well, it seems like that's starting to soften. JP Morgan actually added the accounts for Gemini and Coinbase over there recently, so they are actually processing transactions for those two venues out there after what they term a, quote, lengthy vetting period. And this apparently has been some secret conversations behind the scenes with Dimon and the folks over there at Coinbase. So maybe, perhaps publicly, this is what we've heard a lot on the institutional side. Publicly, they're perhaps a little bit down on all things crypto. Behind the scenes, not so much. Of course, that doesn't stop outlets like Goldman Sachs from putting out papers like 5 reasons that cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, are not an asset class in a recent outlook out there. So it still is on the institutional front a bit of a crapshoot how people are viewing all things crypto. As we head on into the other side of the crypto fence, yes, it is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, let's get to it. Altcoin time. Let's start, as we like to do, in the top 10 out there, because we are seeing a little bit of a jump out here. Let's do it. Let's go reverse. Let's go reverse, because maybe you'll see exactly what I mean once I hit number 10. Number 10, Cardano, 2.2 billion. My usual caveat applies yet again. Take these overall market caps with a pretty tasty grain of salt, but I think the rankings are good. Number 10, Cardano. Interesting. Number 2.2 billion. Number 9, EOS, with about 2.6 billion. Number 8, Binance Coin, 2.7 billion. Number 7, Litecoin, 3 billion. Number 6, Bitcoin SV, 3.5 billion. Number 5, Bitcoin Cash, 4.6 billion. Number 4, XRP, yes, 8.9 billion. You might say, wait a minute, XRP has been a number 3 for pretty much since you started doing this show. You are correct. XRP, now number 4. That means Tether. The much maligned Tether. Remember, it was infamously linked to perhaps using it as a way to drive Bitcoin off to the 20,000 peak that it hit back in late 2017. It's been tied to other interesting developments since then. Tether, now at the number 3 spot, 9.2 billion. Should just eking out. Good old XRP, number 2, ETH, still 27 billion. Number 1, of course, Bitcoin. So a little bit of a change, a little bit of a shakeup out there in the top 10. That's actually nice. It's been nice to see that, just for, maybe not nice for XRP fans, but nice nonetheless to see a little bit of development, a little bit of evolution out there. That top 10 has kind of been glued to where it has been for the better part of quite some time since we've been watching good old top 10 out here in crypto land. Let's break down. Let's start in number 2 land. Let's go out to ETH. ETH having a little bit of a nice run, up about 4.25 handles from last show. Come into Showtime was at 243, actually even out there. So interesting stuff out in ETH land. Let's talk a little bit of vol. Last show, the realized vol was down to about 79%. Coming into today's show, we're seeing it pretty much unched at about 80% out there right now. So not a lot of change out there on the realized front. Let's go out to the implied vol, 30-day implied. Again, all this data coming from our friends, I should say, over there at SKEW land. Actually down a little bit as well. It was 70%. Now it's, 77%. Now it is 68% on the show this week. So a little bit of vol reduction, to put it euphemistically, out there in good old ETH options. Let's look at the volume out here. June 1st was an active day out there on the options front of ETH as well. Remember, that was a big day for Bitcoin options as well. June 1st doing 30 million worth of notional. That's pretty much far and away more than our other biggest day, which was actually beyond this, back to May 30th, 20 million. And in this cycle over the past week, the biggest day outside of that was about half of that at 17 million. So June 1st was the big day. ETH has been holding up well for a while now. Some big changes going on in the ETH network, and that's been driving some paper out there of late. So previously we saw the biggest spike was about 8 or so million on recent shows, and of course last show was about 20 million. So we have seen continued increases in the upside volume spikes there in ETH land, and this time 30 million. So we'll see what it will be on the next show. Definitely looking up. Let's look out to the SKEW. We'll see if the SKEW is looking up. Let's head on out to, let's see the change. There we go. There's our SKEW numbers. It was 4.2% on the last show. Positive this month, or I should say this week. This 1 month SKEW is down to negative 8.2%, so it has swung quite a bit. Remember, it's kind of counterintuitive. Negative shows the calls are leading the dance, so the calls are firmly in the favor right now, from a positive 4.2% not too long ago to now a negative 8.2% from 4.2%. So a big swing, 12-point swing out there in ETH SKEW, which is pretty sizable. Let's look at the OI, see if that is sizable as well. The last show we were looking at about 73 million OI. Let's see what it is right now. Deribit growing quite a bit, pretty much doubling, almost actually exactly doubling. It's 146 million in terms of overall open interest right now. So seeing sizable growth out there on the Deribit, or I should say the ETH options front on Deribit and other platforms as well. So interesting stuff. ETH, a firm number 2. And that's being held up out here in the overall options volume and vol and metrics as well. Let's look at Ripple. Ripple, oddly enough, even though it has fallen off the top 3 of the market cap, is effectively unched down fractions of a cent. So it wasn't overall underlying that caused it to move. Obviously, it's like probably a bit of a spike in Tether pricing out there. I might start breaking down a little bit of Tether here on the show just for a bit of frame of reference out there. But ETH, I should say XRP, kind of unched on the week. Bitcoin Cash up strong this week, up nearly 10 handles, 997 from where it was last show. And our old friend Bitcoin SV down about 3.5 points from last show. As you know, not really active options markets on any of those, unfortunately, but we're hoping to see those pick up as we head on into our final segment. It is time to answer your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to your crypto questions segment. Got a lot of you guys chiming in. Frequent listener and chimer-inner, Mr. Scott Somer here, chiming in on our last episode where we sat down with the folks from Gemini, kind of caught up with them. They are part of the Samsung wallet now. A lot of things going off. Obviously, they're getting their transaction processed by JP Morgan now. So crypto space growing up a little bit from that perspective. Scott Somer asking if this is the Gemini crypto exchange and not the Gemini, which is the NASDAQ-owned all electronic options exchange, which he mentions, which, of course, prior to 2016 was part of the ISE exchange family. Yes. Yes, you are correct there, Scott. If you listen to the episode, you know Janine, who was joining us on the episode, actually used to be part of the ISE team. That's how I first met her way back in the day. So it is kind of a bit of an interesting evolution of the space that she went from one exchange called Gemini, part of the ISE, now NASDAQ family, to yet another exchange called Gemini, which is on the crypto space. I'm sure probably not a little bit of coincidence afoot there, but it does show how small and indeed incestuous the exchange world is at the end of the day. But yes, you are correct, Scott. It is the Gemini Crypto Exchange. We're not talking about breaking out some obscure volume from the Gemini Exchange, which is one of the 6 that NASDAQ owns now on the options front. It doesn't really let up the volume tape too much. Certainly not enough to merit its own inclusion on an episode. All right, next up, Drake. Drake wants to know, do you think Bitcoin needs to maintain a level above 10,000 to maintain the broad interest of the investing public? You know, we have seen a strong correlation out there, Drake and others, with the resurgence of price in Bitcoin, certainly since the end of crypto winter, and the resurgence of interest in it. They are tied inexorably out there, particularly as you term it, with the broad investing public. As it continues to rally, it will attract more attention and more mindshare. That is just the fact of it. And it seems like when things were drifting and threatening the 3,000 handle to the downside, the end of crypto winter, interest was flagging. And now all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, it has turned for a while, but now that we're threatening 10,000 again, and we're post-halving and volume is ticking up, it does seem like interest is growing. Of course, some of the other factors at work in the world could be contributing to that as well. There are a lot of folks out there are looking for alternatives to the current either monetary system or current equity markets, or pick your poison. There's a lot of trouble abroad in all of those spaces right now, so it doesn't take a radical person to want to look for an alternative. Some people are upset about the way the Fed has been just injecting money into the broad market. That's always a driver for folks into the crypto space. So it could be a combination of all of the above. But yes, in general, Drake, I will say that if it can maintain a level, at least around, it doesn't have to be above 10,000, but it has to be well north of that 3,000, 4,000 level that it bottomed out at not too long ago. If it stays above that, stays in a reasonable range up here right now, and continues perhaps drift higher, I do think we will see more growth out there in the space, more brokers paying more attention to it, making it easier for you guys to actually access it on your traditional brokerage accounts, all the things that this marketplace needs. Institutional players will start to come in more. Again, all the things, the baby steps that this marketplace really needs to take the step into becoming a big boy marketplace out there. All right, good question. Let's wrap it up with a couple of comments here, a little bit of love from you guys out there in the listening audience. First off, we've got George. George says, thanks for having so many exchanges and brokers and others from the crypto world on your show. You're doing great work. You should put out a Patreon or a GoFundMe for all of your effort. Keep it up. Thank you, George. We appreciate all the love. You guys are clearly liking this program, and indeed all the shows on the network these days. You're devouring them all, so we're thankful for that. You're not the first one. People ask us that all the time. Hey, how can we contribute, become a part of the network in some capacity? We've been hold off on that mode for a long time. We prefer to have the big players come in and pay to support the network, and that is indeed our model out there. We're looking for interesting new players to mix it up on the crypto space. It's a little bit different, a little bit more of a due diligence process, obviously, on the crypto space than it is, let's say, in the broad general derivative space, where we could have, these Fidelities and the CMEs and all these other big players that you've heard of. Not as many of those in the crypto space, so we have to be a little bit more diligent in who we allow on to sponsor a show like this. But in the meantime, no, we don't have any of those Patreons or GoFundMes. It's something we've toyed with. If we did that, it wouldn't be a Patreon, though. It wouldn't be a GoFundMe. It would be we would offer some sort of premium offering that would be some sort of additional value added for those of you who are so inclined. And we do get those inquiries all the time. I know a lot of my hosts on this network are champing at the bit to do something like that. So it may be something we offer. It won't diminish what you guys already get for free on the network, but it might be an additional offering for those of you who are hardcore, and you know who you are out there, and you like it in your ear holes 24/7. We'll make something, maybe, something a little bit on the premium side. But right now, just enjoy. If you like the network, keep listening, share it with friends, get it out there, leave a review on the platform of choice. Doesn't cost you anything to listen, hasn't for the last nearly 14 years. Just spread the love. That's how you pay us back here on the network. And last up, a little bit of love here from Elliot. Just says, great show. Well, you're a great listener, Elliot. You and all of you, rest of you out there who listen to the show, enjoy it. I see where you guys are all coming from. You're coming from hither and yon and all over the place to devour this show. I really do appreciate it. Keep the love coming, and we'll keep the Crypto Rundown coming to you right back here again next Monday.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.